Story number 1. Whispers on the White Peak. I've always been drawn to the solitude of the mountains, the way their silent majesty offers both refuge and challenge. So, when my friends suggested a winter camping trip to the Sierra Nevada, I didn't hesitate. The idea of conquering a peak blanketed in pristine snow was exhilarating. Little did I know, the mountain held secrets that would haunt me long after I left its icy embrace. We arrived at the base of White Peak just as the sun began to set, painting the snow-covered landscape with hues of orange and pink. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the distant roar of a waterfall. Our group of 4, Mark, Lisa, Jenna, and me, set up camp near a frozen creek, the tent flaps flapping gently in the cold breeze. As night fell, we huddled around a roaring fire, sharing stories and laughter, the warmth a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. "Nothing beats a winter night in the Sierra," Mark said, tossing another log onto the flames. His voice echoed softly against the silent pines. Lisa nodded, sipping her hot cocoa. "It's so peaceful here, just us and the mountains." Jenna, the most adventurous of us, leaned back, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "I read about some old legends in these parts. They say White Peak is haunted by the spirit of a woman who lost her way in a snowstorm centuries ago." I chuckled, trying to lighten the mood. "Come on, Jenna, ghost stories are for kids." But as the night deepened, an unsettling feeling began to settle over us. The kind that creeps up on you when the shadows grow longer and the wind whispers secrets through the trees. Around midnight, as the fire crackled and the forest lay silent under a blanket of snow, I heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible sound of footsteps crunching through the snow. At first, I thought it was just an animal, perhaps a fox or a rabbit, but the rhythm was too deliberate, too human. I glanced up, seeing nothing but the darkness surrounding our campsite. "Did you guys hear that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the crackling fire. Mark sat up, his eyes scanning the snowy expanse. "Probably just some wildlife, nothing to worry about." But the footsteps continued, circling our tent, stopping occasionally as if someone or something was pacing just outside. My heart pounded in my chest, a primal fear taking hold as I debated whether to investigate or retreat to the safety of the firelight. Jenna, ever the brave one, grabbed her flashlight. "I'm going to check it out," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "No, Jenna," Lisa urged, her eyes wide with concern. "It could be dangerous." But Jenna was already moving towards the edge of the campsite, her flashlight cutting through the darkness. I watched as she disappeared into the snowy night, the sound of her footsteps mingling with the mysterious ones circling our tent. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as we waited in tense silence, the fire now casting long, flickering shadows that danced eerily around us. Finally, Jenna returned, her face pale and eyes darting nervously. "I didn't find anyone," she reported, her voice shaky. "Just some tracks leading into the forest. But nothing else." Mark frowned, stepping closer to peer into the darkness. "Maybe it was someone lost in the storm," he suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. We decided to get some rest, hoping that whatever was out there would move on with the dawn. But sleep eluded me. The image of footsteps circling our tent burned into my mind. When morning finally arrived, the first light of day revealed something horrifying. We were no longer sitting in the exact spot where we had camped the night before. Our tent had been moved several meters to the north, lying slightly askew on the snow. The surrounding area was undisturbed. No signs of anyone having pushed or pulled the tent. I stepped outside, scanning the landscape for any clues. But there was nothing, just the vast, silent expanse of White Peak. "We need to leave," I said, my voice tight with fear. "Something's not right here." As we packed up, Lisa pointed out something even more disturbing: small footprints encircling our tent, leading into the dense forest and then disappearing without a trace. They were unmistakably human, But there was something odd about them. They had only 4 toes instead of 5. These aren't normal footprints, Mark observed, his voice filled with dread. What kind of person has 4 toes? Before we could ponder further, a piercing scream echoed through the forest, sending chills down our spines. The sound was sharp, filled with anguish, and it seemed to come from all around us. Panic set in as we realized that our presence might have disturbed something ancient and malevolent. "We have to go. Now!" Jenna shouted, grabbing her gear as we hurriedly made our way back to the car. The drive down White Peak was a blur of fear and adrenaline, the memories of the haunted campsite replaying in my mind. The sun was high now, but the unease lingered like a shadow. We didn't speak much, each of us lost in our own thoughts, the legends of White Peak taking on a terrifying reality. But even as we reached the safety of civilization, the haunting presence of that night stayed with me. Days turned into weeks, and though we tried to move on, the image of the faceless woman in white wandered through my dreams, her silent plea echoing in the recesses of my mind. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to research the history of White Peak and the mysterious disappearance of the family that had cursed the mountain. Local archives and old newspapers revealed a tragic story from over a century ago. A family of 5 who had been caught in a relentless snowstorm while camping on White Peak. Their car had been found abandoned, buried in snow, with no signs of struggle or explanation for their disappearance. The only clue was a set of large, 4-toed footprints leading into the forest, never to return. Legend had it that the family had inadvertently disturbed the spirit of a woman who had lost her children to the same storm, her grief turning into a curse that claimed any who dared to camp on the mountain. The faceless woman in white was said to be her restless spirit, forever searching for her lost children and punishing those who trespassed on her sacred ground. Armed with this knowledge, I reached out to Mark, Lisa, and Jenna, sharing my findings and the realization that our experience was directly tied to the family's tragic fate. We decided to return to White Peak, this time with the intention of appeasing the restless spirit and breaking the curse that had haunted my family for generations. We planned meticulously, bringing offerings of candles, flowers, and a photo of the lost family to honor their memory. On a clear, cold night, we returned to the campsite, the snow glittering under the moonlight. As we set up our offerings, the air grew thick with anticipation, the silence of the forest pressing in on us. "We need to show respect and ask for forgiveness," I explained, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on my shoulders. We began our ceremony, lighting the candles and placing the flowers around our tent. I held the photo of the family, feeling a connection to their sorrow and loss. As we spoke our words of apology and remembrance, the temperature dropped sharply, the wind picking up as if responding to our pleas. Suddenly, the footprints began to form again, circling our tent in a deliberate pattern. The air shimmered, and the ghostly figure of the faceless woman appeared once more, her presence both terrifying and sorrowful. "Why do you return?" she whispered, her voice a haunting melody that echoed through the night. "We're sorry for disturbing your peace," I replied, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "We honor your memory and seek to bring you peace." The woman's form softened, her eyes, though still hollow, seeming to hold a glimmer of hope. "Remember us," she whispered, her voice fading as she began to dissolve into the snowflakes around us. "Keep our memory alive, and the curse will end." With those final words, the oppressive cold lifted, the footprints fading away as the spirit found the closure she so desperately sought. The night grew calm, the snow gently falling around us, a sign of peace returning to White Peak. Leaving White Peak felt different, lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from our souls. The legends were no longer just stories, but truths that we had witnessed and helped to resolve. Our bond as friends deepened, forged in the fires of shared fear and the triumph of compassion over darkness. But even years later, the memory of that night lingers, a reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, and the power of respect and remembrance in healing old wounds. Sometimes, during the quiet moments of winter, when the wind whistles through the pines and the snow blankets the earth in silence, I catch a faint whisper on the breeze, a gentle echo of gratitude from the spirits we helped to set free. And so, the legend of the faceless woman in white remains a testament to the enduring power of memory and the importance of honoring those who came before us, ensuring that their stories are never forgotten and that their spirits find the peace they so desperately seek. Story number 2. Mystery Lights in the Redwood. I've always been captivated by the towering giants of the redwood forests. Their immense trunks and sprawling canopies create an otherworldly atmosphere, especially when cloaked in winter's icy embrace. So, when my friends suggested a winter camping trip deep into the heart of Redwood National Park, I didn't hesitate. Little did I know, that decision would lead us into an eerie encounter that still haunts my dreams. It was early December when we arrived at the trailhead. The air crisp and the ground blanketed in fresh snow. Our group of 5, Mark, Lisa, Jenna, Tom, and me, were seasoned campers, eager to explore the secluded parts of the forest rarely touched by other adventurers. We set up our tents in a clearing surrounded by ancient redwoods, the silence of the forest only broken by the occasional rustle of wildlife and the distant call of an owl. As night fell, we gathered around the campfire, sharing stories and sipping hot cocoa to fend off the biting cold. The flames flickered, casting long shadows that danced among the trees, creating an almost magical ambience. The sky above was clear, a tapestry of stars twinkling against the inky blackness. "Isn't this perfect?" Mark said, leaning back against a sturdy pine. "Just us and the wilderness." Lisa nodded, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "There's something so peaceful about being here. No distractions, just nature." Jenna, always the storyteller, began recounting local legends about the redwood forests, tales of spirits and unexplained phenomena that added a layer of mystery to our adventure. Tom laughed it off, shaking his head. "Come on, Jenna, ghost stories are for kids." But as the night deepened, an unsettling feeling began to settle over us, a sense that we were not entirely alone in the vast expanse of trees. Around midnight, a strange phenomenon began to unfold. At first, it was just a faint, bluish glow flickering between the trees. We thought it might be the reflection of our campfire or perhaps distant lanterns from another group of campers. But as minutes passed, the lights grew brighter and more numerous, moving in a way that defied logic. "Did you guys see that?" I whispered, my breath visible in the frigid air. Mark squinted into the darkness, trying to discern the source. "Probably just some deer or something. Let's not make a big deal out of it." But the lights continued to multiply, swirling around our campsite in a mesmerizing dance. They moved without any discernible pattern, floating effortlessly through the air, casting an eerie blue hue that contrasted sharply with the warm glow of our fire. Lisa grabbed her flashlight, trying to illuminate the source of the lights. "This is getting creepy. Maybe we should pack up and leave." Before anyone could respond, the lights abruptly changed direction, moving towards us with an unnatural speed. The temperature seemed to drop further, the cold intensifying as the lights hovered just beyond our reach, flickering silently in the still night. "We need to go," Tom insisted, his voice tinged with fear. "Now." We quickly packed up our gear, the unease turning into palpable dread as we prepared to leave. As we made our way through the thick snow, the lights followed us, maintaining a consistent distance, their silent presence unnerving us all. The trek back to the trailhead felt endless, the forest seemingly closing in around us. The lights continued their relentless pursuit, never advancing but always present, their bluish glow casting ghostly shadows on the snow-covered ground. Every crunch of our boots sounded amplified in the oppressive silence, each step fueled by a desperate desire to escape. Jenna, usually the most composed of us, was visibly shaken. "Why are they following us? What do they want?" I didn't have an answer, All I could think was that something inexplicable was at play, something beyond our understanding. The lights never emitted any sound, their presence a constant reminder of the mystery that enveloped us. As we neared the trailhead, the first hints of dawn began to break, the sky lightening with shades of pink and orange. The lights started to fade, their intensity diminishing as the sun's rays began to pierce through the forest canopy. One by one, they disappeared, leaving us standing in the quiet aftermath of an inexplicable encounter. "We made it," Mark breathed, exhaling a long, shaky breath. "Let's never speak of this again." But the experience left an indelible mark on all of us. The image of those floating blue lights, their silent pursuit through the snowy night, haunted our thoughts long after we left the redwood forest behind. Back in the safety of my home, I couldn't shake the memory of that night. Determined to find answers, I delved into local folklore and historical records, hoping to uncover any clues about the mysterious lights. What I discovered was a tale of tragedy and unresolved sorrow that stretched back generations. Decades ago, a family had ventured into the redwood forests for a winter camping trip. Caught in an unexpected snowstorm, they became lost in the dense wilderness. Despite extensive search efforts, the family was never found. Locals believed that their spirits were forever bound to the forest, their sorrow manifesting as the elusive blue lights we had encountered. The legend spoke of the family's desperate search for a way out, their lingering presence unable to find peace in the unforgiving winter landscape. The blue lights were believed to be their restless spirits, eternally guiding and, in some interpretations, trapping those who ventured too deeply into the forest. Armed with this knowledge, I reached out to my friends, sharing the story behind our terrifying encounter. While some were skeptical, others were equally unsettled, the lines between legend and reality blurring in our collective memory. We decided to return to Redwood, not to confront the spirits, but to pay our respects and seek closure for the restless souls that haunted the forest. On a clear winter night, we returned to the same campsite, the snow glistening under the full moon. This time, we approached with a sense of reverence, setting up a small altar of candles and offerings at the center of our tent. As we sat in silence, we hoped to honor the memory of the lost family and perhaps bring peace to their lingering spirits. Hours passed without incident, the night calm and serene, but as midnight approached, the air grew cold, and the same faint, bluish lights began to appear among the trees. Instead of fear, a sense of compassion filled us, understanding the pain that held the spirits captive. "We're here to remember you," I whispered, my voice steady despite the chill. "We honor your memory and seek to help you find peace." The lights began to move, this time with a gentle grace, circling our campsite in a harmonious dance. As we held our vigil, the oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a warm, comforting presence. The blue lights gradually faded, their ethereal glow merging with the dawn's first light. A profound sense of calm settled over us. The forest no longer a place of fear but one of remembrance and respect. The spirits had found the closure they sought, and the curse that had bound them was finally lifted. Leaving Redwood that morning felt different, lighter, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from our souls. The legend of the blue lights remained, but it was no longer a tale of fear. Instead, it became a story of compassion and the enduring power of memory to heal even the deepest wounds. But sometimes, on the coldest winter nights, when the wind whispers through the towering redwoods and the snow blankets the earth in silence, I can still see the faint blue lights dancing among the trees, a gentle reminder that some spirits linger, seeking remembrance and peace, and that every story deserves to be heard and remembered. Story number 3. The Vanishing Tent. I've always been drawn to the rugged beauty of Big Sur, where the cliffs meet the Pacific in a dramatic embrace. The allure of untouched wilderness and the promise of solitude make it the perfect escape from the chaos of everyday life. So, when my friends suggested a winter camping trip, I didn't hesitate to join, Little did I know, that decision would lead us into a nightmare we couldn't have imagined. It was early December when we arrived at the secluded campsite nestled between towering redwoods and overlooking a frozen section of the coastline. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the distant roar of crashing waves. We set up our tents with practiced efficiency, the snow crunching under our boots as we worked. By nightfall, we were huddled around a roaring fire, the warmth a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. "Nothing beats a winter night in Big Sur," Mark said, his breath visible in the firelight as he tossed another log onto the flames. Lisa nodded, sipping her hot cocoa. "It's so peaceful here, just us and nature." Emma, the youngest of our group, lay curled up in her sleeping bag, her eyes heavy with sleep. The serenity of the night was almost meditative, the sounds of the forest blending into a soothing lullaby. We shared stories and laughed, the bond of friendship wrapping around us like a cozy blanket. That night, around midnight, the tranquility was shattered by an eerie sound, soft footsteps circling our tent. At first, we thought it was wildlife, perhaps a deer or a fox, but the deliberate rhythm of the steps sent a chill down my spine. I glanced around, trying to locate the source, but the darkness was impenetrable. "Did you guys hear that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the crackling fire. Mark sat up, squinting into the shadows. "Probably just an animal. Don't worry about it." But the footsteps continued, growing louder and more defined, as if someone or something was pacing just beyond our sight. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as a sense of unease settled over me. Lisa reached out, gripping my arm tightly. "Maybe we should check it out," she suggested, her voice shaky. "No way," Mark replied firmly. "We've heard no evidence of anyone being around. It's probably nothing." Despite his reassurances, the feeling of being watched intensified. The footsteps seemed to move in a loop, never straying far from our tent. Every so often, a twig would snap under unseen weight, making us jump. Emma stirred, murmuring in her sleep, oblivious to the growing tension. Unable to shake off the unease, I decided to take a walk, hoping the fresh air would calm my nerves. As I trudged through the snow, the moonlight casting long shadows on the ground, the sounds of the forest enveloped me. The crunch of my boots on the snow was the only sound until I heard it again. The footsteps, now unmistakably human, echoing around me. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. The footsteps stopped abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence. I stood still, heart pounding, listening intently. After a moment, the footsteps resumed, moving in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate, circling back towards our campsite. Panic began to set in. I hurried back to the tent, my mind racing with questions. Who or what was out there? And why were they circling us? The next morning, we woke to an unsettling sight. Our tent had been moved several meters from its original spot, lying slightly askew but otherwise undamaged. There were no footprints leading to or from the tent, no signs of anyone having tampered with it. The snow around us was undisturbed, save for the faint impressions of the tent's edges. "What the hell happened?" Lisa exclaimed, stepping out to inspect the area. Mark joined her, kneeling beside the tent. "There's no way someone moved it without leaving traces. It's like it just slid." Emma, still groggy, wandered over, rubbing her eyes. "Did you guys see my teddy bear? It's not inside anymore." We searched the tent thoroughly, finding the teddy bear tucked under a sleeping bag. Nothing else seemed out of place. Yet the experience left us shaken. We decided to pack up quickly, the sense of unease still lingering like a shadow over us. As we broke camp, the sun climbed higher, casting a harsh light on the pristine snow. The beauty of Big Sur was undeniable, but so was the mystery that now surrounded us. We drove back to town in silence, the events of the night playing over in our minds like a broken record. That evening, back in the safety of our homes, I couldn't shake the image of our tent being moved by an invisible force. I delved into local lore, seeking answers in old forums and archived news articles. That's when I stumbled upon a chilling story from a few decades ago. A family who had vanished without a trace while camping in the same area. Their campsite had been found abandoned, with their tent inexplicably moved and surrounded by footprints leading into the dense forest. Never to return. The more I read, the more the pieces fit together. Could our experience be connected to that tragic event? Was our campsite built on hallowed, haunted ground? Determined to uncover the truth, I reached out to Mark and Lisa. We decided to return to Big Sur, this time armed with cameras and equipment to document any paranormal activity. The drive back felt different, the landscape more foreboding under the weight of our discovery. When we arrived, the snow had intensified, covering everything in a thick, white blanket that seemed to mute the world around us. Setting up camp near the old family site, we felt the presence of the past pressing in on us. The air was heavy with sorrow, the silence almost tangible. As night fell, we sat around the fire once more, our nerves on edge, eyes darting into the darkness. Around midnight, the footsteps returned, louder and more insistent than before. This time, the pattern was clear, circling our tent with purpose. We watched in horror as shadows danced just beyond the firelight. Shapes that seemed almost human but twisted by an otherworldly force. "Stay inside," Mark urged, pulling us back towards the tent. "We need to protect ourselves." But as we tried to retreat, the fire flared up violently, the flames licking higher without any additional wood. The temperature soared unnaturally, the heat suffocating as the whispers of the past filled the air. Through the crackling flames, we saw them, ghostly apparitions of the lost family, their eyes hollow with despair, reaching out towards us with pleading hands. "We didn't mean to disturb you," I cried, my voice cracking under the weight of fear and sorrow. "We're sorry." The apparitions seemed to respond, their forms flickering like unstable shadows. The leader, a man with sorrow etched into his faceless visage, stepped forward. "Respect our rest," he whispered, his voice blending with the roar of the flames. "Remember our story." As quickly as they appeared, the apparitions began to fade, the fire subsiding to a gentle warmth. The footsteps ceased, and a profound silence enveloped us. We sat there, trembling and breathless, the message clear and hauntingly simple. In the days that followed, we shared our story with locals, who listened with a mixture of sympathy and fear. The legend of the vanished family was rekindled, their tragic end serving as a warning to those who dared to camp in the haunted woods of Big Sur. We left with a newfound respect for the land and the restless spirits that called it home. But even now, years later, the memory of that night lingers. Sometimes, when the wind whistles through the redwoods and the snow blankets the earth in silence, I can almost hear the faint echoes of footsteps circling my tent. A gentle reminder that some stories never truly end and that the past always finds a way to reach into the present. Story number 4. Whispers in the Pines. I've always been enchanted by the serene beauty of Lake Tahoe in winter, the way the snow blankets the towering pines, turning the landscape into a silent, white expanse, was something I couldn't resist. So, when my partner, Lisa, and I decided to take a break from the chaos of city life, a winter camping trip seemed like the perfect escape. Little did we know, the tranquility of those snowy nights would soon give way to an unsettling nightmare. We arrived at the campsite just as dusk began to settle, the sky painted with hues of pink and orange reflecting off the icy surface of the lake. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and the promise of a peaceful night. After setting up our tent and gathering firewood, we built a roaring campfire, its warmth a comforting contrast to the biting cold. As we sat around the fire, sharing stories and sipping hot cocoa, the sounds of the forest enveloped us, the crackling of the flames, the rustling of the pines, and the distant call of an owl created a harmonious symphony that lulled us into a state of relaxation. Lisa drifted off to sleep first, her head resting peacefully against a pillow, while I stared into the flames, lost in thought. It was on the second night that everything changed. Around midnight, a soft, plaintive sound pierced the stillness of the night, a child's cry, echoing through the dense forest. At first, I dismissed it as the wind playing tricks on our ears, but the sound persisted, growing louder and more desperate with each passing minute. I nudged Lisa awake, gently shaking her shoulder. "Do you hear that?" I whispered, my voice tinged with unease. She stirred, her eyes blinking open to meet mine. "Hear what?" she murmured, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "That crying," I replied, pointing towards the dark silhouettes of the pines beyond our campfire. The sound was unmistakable now, a child's anguished wail that seemed to reverberate through the very air. Curiosity and concern got the better of us. We decided to investigate, believing it might be a lost hiker or perhaps wildlife in distress. Packing a flashlight and a warm blanket, we cautiously ventured into the forest, the snow crunching softly under our boots. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sound our own footsteps and the distant, haunting cries that seemed to guide us deeper into the woods. The moon was a thin crescent, casting a pale light that barely penetrated the thick canopy above. As we followed the sound, the cries grew louder, more urgent, pulling us towards an area we hadn't explored before. After what felt like hours, we stumbled upon a small clearing, the moonlight illuminating a lone, abandoned campsite. The remnants of a fire lay cold and dead, and scattered around were signs of a hurried departure. A torn tent, broken branches, and a single, tiny shoe partially buried in the snow. Lisa knelt down, picking up the shoe with trembling hands. "This must belong to a child," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence. "But where are they?" Before we could ponder further, the temperature seemed to drop even more, the air thick with an oppressive chill. The cries returned, now mixed with a whispering that sent shivers down my spine. "Don't leave us," the voices seemed to say, their tones filled with sorrow and fear. Panic set in as we realized we were not alone. The forest around us felt alive, the trees looming menacingly as the whispers grew louder, surrounding us from every direction. I grabbed Lisa's hand, pulling her towards the edge of the clearing. "We need to go," I urged, my heart racing. But as we turned to leave, the ground beneath us began to tremble, and the snow around the campsite started to swirl violently, forming into ghostly apparitions, the spirits of a family, their faces etched with despair, materialized before us, eyes hollow, bodies transparent yet undeniably present. "We never left," the father's voice echoed, his eyes empty voids of sorrow. "Trapped by our own mistakes." The mother reached out a spectral hand, her fingers passing through Lisa's shoulder with a chilling touch. "You must remember us," she whispered, her voice filled with an unending grief. "Acknowledge our pain." Tears welled up in my eyes as I tried to comprehend the apparition before me. "We're sorry," I managed to say, my voice cracking. "We didn't know. We didn't mean any harm." The spirits hovered for a moment, their sorrow palpable in the freezing air. Then, as if a weight had been lifted, they began to fade, their forms dissolving into the night air like mist. The oppressive chill lifted, and the forest seemed to return to its peaceful state. The cries and whispers silenced. Shaken and breathless, Lisa and I made our way back to the campsite, the memory of the encounter etched into our minds. We packed up our gear in silence, the first light of dawn beginning to break through the horizon, melting the remnants of the night's horrors with its warm glow. As we drove away from the forest, the sun rising over Lake Tahoe, I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of relief mixed with a lingering unease. The spirits had found some semblance of peace, but the experience left an indelible mark on us both. In the weeks that followed, we shared our story with friends and locals, many of whom were skeptical but others nodded knowingly, sharing similar tales of restless spirits and tragic accidents in the area. The disappearance of the family that fateful winter had long been a subject of hushed conversations, a dark chapter in the history of our beloved wilderness. Years later, the memory of that winter night remains vivid in my mind, a haunting reminder of the thin veil that separates the living from the dead, and the importance of remembering those who have been lost. The whispers in the pines still send shivers down my spine, especially during the coldest nights when the wind carries echoes of sorrow and despair. Lisa and I returned to Lake Tahoe many times after that, but we never encountered the spirits again. The forest seemed to hold its secrets tightly, the spirits finding peace in the silence we had helped restore. Yet, sometimes, when the snow falls heavy and the night is still, I can almost hear the faint whispers carried on the wind, a gentle, lingering echo of a family's plea to be remembered and never forgotten. Story number 5. The Faceless Shadow of Death Valley. I've always been drawn to the desolate beauty of Death Valley, a vast expanse where the earth meets the sky in an unforgiving embrace. As a seasoned traveler and amateur photographer, I sought out the most remote corners, hoping to capture the untouched wilderness through my lens. But one winter night, my quest for solitude and stunning vistas led me to an encounter that forever altered my perception of this haunting landscape. It was early December when I planned my trip. The weather reports predicted mild temperatures, a rarity in Death Valley's relentless summers. With my gear packed and my mind set on exploring the less-traveled paths, I embarked on a solo journey, eager to document the serene yet stark beauty of the desert under a blanket of snow. The road to the valley was long and winding, the scenery transitioning from arid plains to rugged mountains as dusk settled. By late afternoon, I reached the Furnace Creek area, a small hub of activity even in the depths of winter. I decided to set up camp near Badwater Basin, the lowest point in North America, where the salt flats stretched endlessly beneath the setting sun. As night fell, the temperature plummeted, and the vast sky unveiled a tapestry of stars. Unmarred by city lights, the silence was profound, broken only by the distant howl of the wind through the dunes. Around midnight, feeling the need to stretch my legs and capture some nocturnal shots, I ventured out of my tent with my camera and a sturdy flashlight. The landscape was ethereal under the moonlight, the snow casting ghostly shadows that danced with every gust of wind. I wandered along the salt flats, mesmerized by the way the ice crystals sparkled like diamonds on the vast, white canvas. That's when I saw him, a figure standing alone at the far end of the basin, cloaked in a long, black coat that contrasted sharply against the pristine snow. At first glance, he appeared human, his posture straight and unwavering. But as I drew closer, an unsettling realization washed over me. The man had no face, where his features should have been. There was only smooth, featureless skin, reflecting the pale light in a way that made him seem almost otherworldly. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached, every instinct screaming at me to turn back. The silence around us was deafening, the only sounds the crunch of my boots on the snow and the distant whisper of the wind. "Hello," I called out softly, my voice barely carrying across the frozen expanse. He didn't respond. Instead, he began to move, walking towards me with slow, deliberate steps. I froze, unable to comprehend what I was witnessing. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping further despite the clear sky. A shiver ran down my spine as the reality of the situation sank in. This was no ordinary man, and I was no longer alone in the vast emptiness of Death Valley. As he drew nearer, I could feel an oppressive presence, a weight pressing down on me that made it difficult to breathe. His movement was unnaturally smooth, almost gliding across the snow without leaving any trace. I reached for my camera, intending to document this bizarre encounter, but my hands trembled uncontrollably, the device slipping from my grasp and clattering against the ice. "Don't step further," a voice echoed in my mind, soft yet filled with an undeniable urgency. It wasn't spoken aloud, but the message was clear, resonating deep within me. I took a hesitant step back, but his gaze, though featureless, felt piercing. searching my very soul. Panic surged through me as the realization dawned. Whatever this being was, it didn't belong to our world. I turned to flee, but the snow seemed to shift beneath my feet, making each step a struggle against an invisible force pulling me back. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices blending into a haunting melody that filled my mind with fear and despair. Desperate to escape, I stumbled towards the edge of the basin, the snow crunching beneath me as I ran with all my might. Behind me, the faceless man pursued, his presence a relentless shadow that mirrored my every move. The wind whipped around us, the storm of whispers reaching a crescendo as the man closed the distance between us. In a last-ditch effort, I dove into my tent, slamming the zipper shut just as the man reached me. My breath came in ragged gasps, the adrenaline coursing through my veins making my heart race uncontrollably. I sat there, trembling, the echoes of his whispers lingering in my ears, a stark reminder of the encounter I could never fully explain. Morning brought a deceptive sense of calm. The storm had passed, leaving behind a serene, snow-covered landscape. I emerged from my tent, the events of the previous night feeling like a distant nightmare. But as I surveyed the area, my blood ran cold. The snow around my campsite bore a new set of footprints, large, four-toed impressions leading in a perfect circle around my tent. Returning to the starting point without venturing into the wilderness, I realized then that I wasn't the first to witness the faceless man, nor would I be the last. The local legend spoke of a cursed spirit, a victim of the unforgiving desert whose restless soul wandered the snow-covered flats, forever seeking something lost. Those who encountered him were said to suffer misfortune or even death, the curse extending beyond Death Valley's borders. Determined to break the cycle, I decided to delve deeper into the history of the curse. Days turned into weeks as I researched old records and interviewed locals, piecing together the tragic story of a man named Samuel Reed, a hunter who had vanished in the valley decades ago. According to the tales, Samuel had been driven by obsession, searching for a mythical creature rumored to grant eternal life. His disappearance had sparked fear and superstition, the curse believed to be his restless spirit's revenge on those who dared to seek what should remain hidden. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to Death Valley, intent on finding a way to appease Samuel's spirit and lift the curse. I set up camp near the same spot where I had encountered him, the memories of that night fueling my determination. The nights were long and cold, the snow a constant reminder of the unforgiving landscape that held so many secrets. On the third night, as midnight approached, I prepared a small offering, a symbolic gesture of respect and a plea for peace. I placed a lantern and a token from Samuel's story on the snow, the flickering light casting shadows that danced with the wind. As I watched, the air grew still, the temperature dropping once more as the faceless man appeared at the edge of the basin. This time, I didn't run. Instead, I stood my ground, my voice steady as I spoke to the apparition. Samuel Reed, I understand your pain. I seek to honor your memory and bring peace to your restless spirit. Please, let go of your anger and find the peace you deserve. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the whispers returned, softer this time, as if the man was considering my words. Slowly, his form began to change, the outline of his face subtly reappearing, revealing eyes filled with sorrow and longing. The oppressive presence lifted, the air warming as the curse began to dissolve. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice now carrying a sense of relief. "May you find the peace I sought." With those final words, the faceless man faded into the night, his spirit finally free from the curse that had bound him for so long. The snow around my campsite began to melt, the footprints disappearing as if they had never existed. Returning home, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and peace. The curse of Death Valley had been lifted, the legend of the faceless man finally finding its resolution. But the experience left an indelible mark on me, a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the supernatural and the power of compassion to heal even the deepest wounds. Yet, sometimes, when the winter winds howl just right and the snow blankets the earth in silence. I catch a faint whisper on the breeze, a gentle echo of gratitude from Samuel Reed. It serves as a reminder that some spirits linger, seeking closure and understanding, and that every encounter with the unknown holds a story waiting to be told and remembered. Story number 6. Whispers from the Fire Pit. I've always found peace in the heart of nature, far away from the chaos of city life. That's why my family and I decided to spend our summer vacation camping in Sequoia National Park, nestled among towering redwoods and beneath a canopy of stars. Our chosen spot felt like the perfect escape. Little did we know, it would become the setting for a nightmarish experience that would forever change our lives. It was late August, the air crisp with the promise of an early fall. We arrived at our campsite just as the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink. The sequoias loomed majestically around us, their ancient trunks whispering secrets carried by the wind. After setting up our tents and gathering firewood, we built a campfire in a cleared area near a small clearing. The flames danced eagerly, casting flickering shadows that danced among the trees. As night fully settled in, we sat around the fire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. The tranquility of the forest was comforting. The only sounds the crackling of the fire and the occasional hoot of an owl. My youngest, Emma, was tucked into her sleeping bag, her eyes heavy with sleep. My husband, Tom, and I chatted quietly, savoring the rare moments of togetherness. Around midnight, the temperature began to drop, the chill seeping into our bones despite the warmth of the fire. We huddled closer, trying to keep warm as the night grew colder. That's when we first heard it, a faint whisper carried by the wind, almost indistinguishable from the rustling leaves. At first, we dismissed it as our imaginations, fueled by the isolation and the eerie stillness of the forest. But the whispers grew louder, more distinct, as if someone or something was trying to communicate with us. The words were unclear, a jumble of sounds that sent shivers down our spines. Tom stood up, peering into the darkness surrounding our campsite. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice tense. I nodded, my heart pounding. It's probably just the wind playing tricks on us. Before we could settle back down, the fire flared up violently, the flames leaping higher and roaring with unnatural intensity. We watched in horror as the fire burned without any additional wood, the flames consuming the already minimal fuel we had gathered. The heat intensified, and the once comforting fire became a menacing force, casting grotesque shadows that twisted and contorted around us. We tried to extinguish the fire, but no matter how much we tried, the flames only grew stronger. Fueled by an unseen energy, the whispers turned into urgent cries, voices filled with anguish and despair that echoed through the forest. Emma stirred in her sleeping bag, waking up to the chaos around her. Her eyes wide with fear, she clutched her blanket tightly. "Mom, Dad, what's happening?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Before we could respond, the ground beneath us began to tremble, the snow-covered earth cracking and shifting as if reacting to the supernatural force at play. The fire seemed to reach out towards us, its heat unbearable despite the icy air. We backed away slowly, stumbling over the uneven ground, trying to find a safe path away from the inferno. In the midst of the chaos, we saw it, a figure standing at the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of the firelight. A woman, her form shrouded in a swirling mist of snowflakes and shadows, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. She extended a hand towards us, her fingers long and cold, her presence both haunting and heartbreaking. "Please help me." Her voice was a mere whisper, yet it cut through the night like a knife. Her sorrow was palpable, an endless well of pain that seemed to pull at our very souls. We watched in terror as the fire began to consume the surrounding trees, the flames transforming into icy shards that danced around us, freezing everything they touched. Tom grabbed my hand, pulling me towards the tent. "We need to get out of here. Now." But as we turned to flee, the path back seemed to vanish, the snow creating a barrier that trapped us in the clearing. The woman moved closer, her form becoming more defined, her eyes meeting ours with a plea that transcended words. "Don't leave me. Don't forget." Desperation took hold as we searched for an escape route. But the forest had transformed into a maze of ice and shadows. The fire continued to rage, now intertwined with the icy mist, creating a surreal and nightmarish landscape. Emma cried out, her fear echoing in the frozen air. As the woman reached out once more, her touch icy and paralyzing. In a moment of sheer panic, I remembered the stories we had read about the spirits of the forest. Tales of lost souls bound to the land by tragic events. Perhaps this woman was one such spirit, forever seeking closure and unable to find peace. Summoning every ounce of courage, I stepped forward, my voice shaking but resolute. "We're sorry," I said, my eyes locked with hers. "We didn't mean to disturb you. How can we help?" For a moment, there was silence, the chaos around us momentarily pausing as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The woman's expression softened, her sorrowful eyes meeting mine with a glimmer of hope. "Find my scarf, return it to the sacred grove," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the roaring fire and the howling wind. "Only then can I be free." With those final words, the woman began to fade, her form dissipating into the swirling snow and mist. The fire slowly subsided, the ice melting away as the night began to calm. The path to our tent reappeared, and we rushed inside, our hearts still racing from the ordeal. We huddled together, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The memory of the woman and her plea etched into our minds. The next day, we gathered our belongings and prepared to leave, the sun rising to reveal a landscape that had returned to its peaceful state. The night's horrors seemingly erased by the morning light. But the memory of that night lingered, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between our world and the spirits that dwell in the shadows. Determined to honor the woman's request and help her find peace, we returned to the site of the campfire. The sacred grove was a secluded area deeper within the forest, a place of ancient significance to the local tribes. Following the directions we had pieced together from her words, we navigated through the snow-covered trees until we reached a clearing bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun. There, at the center of the grove, lay her scarf, a vibrant red scarf now partially buried in the snow, its fabric worn and frayed from the night's ordeal. Carefully, we retrieved it, the moment feeling sacred and solemn. As we held the scarf, the air around us seemed to warm, the oppressive cold lifting as if the forest was acknowledging our effort to help. We returned to the clearing, placing the scarf on a flat stone at the grove's center. As we did, a sense of calm enveloped the area, the spirits of the forest seemingly at peace. The whispers that had haunted us were now replaced by the gentle rustling of the leaves and the soft chirping of birds welcoming the new day. Our experience in Yosemite became a pivotal moment in our lives, a lesson in compassion and the importance of respecting the spirits that dwell within nature. The curse that had plagued our family for generations was broken, not through fear or force, but through empathy and the simple act of listening to the pleas of a lost soul. But sometimes, on particularly cold nights when the wind howls just right and the snow blankets the landscape in a thick silence, I can still hear the faint whispers carried on the breeze, a soft, lingering echo of gratitude from the woman we helped. It serves as a gentle reminder that some spirits never truly fade and that every cry deserves to be heard and remembered. Story number 7. Whispers in the Snow. I've always been drawn to Yosemite's raw beauty, the towering granite cliffs, the serene lakes, and the untouched wilderness that seems to stretch into eternity. So, when my group of college friends decided to embark on a winter camping trip, I was the first to sign up. There's something magical about experiencing nature's splendor blanketed in snow, untouched by the bustling crowds of summer. Little did I know, The winter of 2023 would reveal a side of Yosemite that defied explanation and plunged us into a nightmare we couldn't escape. It was mid-December when we arrived at Yosemite's northern trails. The snow falling steadily, cloaking the landscape in a thick, white silence. Our destination was a secluded campsite near Mirror Lake, a spot reputed for its breathtaking views and relative solitude. We set up our tents with practiced ease, the cold biting at our fingers despite the layers we wore. The first night was uneventful, filled with laughter and stories as we huddled around a small, portable heater inside one of the larger tents. But on the second night, as darkness deepened and the wind howled through the pines, an unsettling tension settled over us. It was around midnight when we first heard it, the faint sound of footsteps crunching in the snow outside our tent. At first, we dismissed it as wildlife or the wind playing tricks on our ears. But the sound persisted, growing louder and more deliberate with each passing minute. "Probably just a deer," Mark suggested, his voice betraying a hint of unease as he peeked out from the tent's flap. "Nah. Deer don't have such heavy footsteps," I replied, my heart pounding in my chest. We fell silent, eyes darting around the tent, trying to locate the source of the noise. The footsteps circled our campsite, stopping occasionally before resuming their path around us. It felt as though something or someone was watching us, stalking our every move from the shadows of the forest. "I'm going to check it out," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. She was the bravest of us, always eager to take the lead. Reluctantly, I followed her out into the frigid night, the snow crunching beneath our boots. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sound the distant call of an owl and the relentless footsteps echoing around our tent. We shone our flashlights into the darkness, scanning the perimeter for any sign of movement. But there was nothing, just the thick blanket of snow and the imposing silhouettes of the pine trees. As we circled back to our tent, I caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of my eye, a dark shape moving swiftly between the trees. My blood ran cold as I realized it was following us. Staying just out of sight, we hurried back to our tent, hearts racing, and huddled together, the sense of being watched intensifying with every passing moment. Morning brought a deceptive sense of relief. The sun pierced through the cloud cover, casting a pale glow over the snow-covered landscape. We woke to find the campsite undisturbed, except for something utterly bizarre: large footprints encircling our tent, as if someone or something had walked around it repeatedly. The footprints were unmistakably human but had only 4 toes, their edges smeared and distorted by the recent snowfall. "Look at this," I called out, stepping outside to inspect the marks. The footprints were fresh, leading from the edge of the tent to the nearby trees and back, without venturing far into the wilderness. Mark examined the prints closely. "These aren't normal. Whoever or whatever it was, it has 4 toes. That's not human." Sarah shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "What kind of creature has 4 toes and walks like that?" Before any of us could ponder further, a distant scream pierced the morning air, sending chills down our spines. We exchanged worried glances, the gravity of our situation sinking in. The legends of Yosemite spoke of restless spirits and unexplained phenomena, but we had always dismissed them as mere stories until now. "We need to leave," Mark insisted, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "This place is cursed." But as we began to pack up, the footprints reappeared, this time more numerous and closer to our tent. Panic set in as we realized we weren't the only ones who had encountered the mysterious presence. The whispers of the past had come to life, entwining our fate with the tragic history of Yosemite. Determined to uncover the truth, I decided to delve into the history of our campsite and the surrounding area. The local ranger station was our first stop, where old maps and archived reports provided a glimpse into Yosemite's dark past. According to the records, decades ago, a family of 5 had vanished without a trace during a severe winter storm. Their car had been found abandoned, buried under snow, with no signs of struggle or violence. The only clue was a set of large, four-toed footprints leading from their vehicle into the forest, similar to the ones we had found. They were the Peterson family, the ranger explained, his voice tinged with sorrow. It's believed they were caught in the storm and possibly claimed by something in the wilderness. Since then, there have been numerous reports of strange sightings and accidents near their last known location. Armed with this information, I realized that the footsteps we had found were likely connected to the Petersons' tragic fate. The curse seemed to be a manifestation of their unresolved pain and the harshness of nature that had claimed their lives. That night, we decided to confront whatever was haunting our campsite. We gathered around the heater, sharing our fears and formulating a plan. Armed with flashlights and the resolve to break the curse, we ventured out once more into the frozen forest. The air was thick with tension, the snow falling silently around us. As we approached the center of the footprints, we felt an overwhelming sense of sorrow and loss, as if the forest itself mourned the lost family. The footsteps led us to a clearing, the moonlight revealing the remnants of the Petersons' abandoned campsite, collapsed tents, scattered belongings, and the eerie four-toed footprints that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. "We need to help them find peace," Sarah said softly, her eyes reflecting the anguish we all felt. "We need to acknowledge their suffering." Following the ranger's advice, we began to perform a makeshift ritual, lighting candles, placing offerings of food, and speaking words of remembrance. The wind picked up, swirling the snow into a frenzied dance around us, as if the spirits were responding to our efforts. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, the candles flickering violently as a ghostly apparition materialized before us. It was the Peterson family, their faces etched with sorrow and despair, their eyes hollow from the torment of their untimely deaths. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the howling wind. "We are trapped," the father's voice echoed, his words filled with pain. "The winter never ended for us. We were lost, forgotten, and now we cannot move on." Tears welled up in my eyes as I reached out a hand, hoping to offer comfort. "We're sorry for what happened. We want to help you find peace." The spirits hovered for a moment, their presence both terrifying and heart-wrenching. Slowly, their forms began to glow with a warm, ethereal light, the oppressive cold lifting as their sorrow began to ease. "Thank you," the mother whispered, her voice now filled with relief. "We can finally rest." With those final words, the spirits dissolved into the night air, the snow calming as if the storm had passed. The footprints around our tent ceased, replaced by a serene silence that enveloped us in a sense of fulfillment and peace. In the aftermath of that night, our group felt a profound sense of closure. The curse that had plagued Yosemite's winter seemed to lift, allowing the Peterson family's spirits to finally find peace. The snow continued to fall, but it was gentle and pure, no longer a harbinger of tragedy but a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the power of compassion to heal even the deepest wounds. We returned to our lives with a newfound respect for the legends that had once seemed so distant. The experience in Yosemite taught us that some stories hold truths far beyond our understanding, and that acknowledging the pain of the past is the first step toward healing and moving forward. But sometimes, on particularly cold nights, when the wind whistles through the trees and the snow blankets the world in silence, I catch a faint whisper on the breeze, a soft, lingering echo of the Peterson family's gratitude. It's a gentle reminder that some spirits never truly fade, and that every cry deserves to be heard and remembered. And so, the legend of the snow carriage and the cursed footprints in Yosemite remains a testament to the enduring power of memory and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all. Even in the coldest of winters,